welcome to this, a brand new addition to the MasakoX channel and various podcasting outlets throughout the world. You are finding us both here, up on the lookout. Yes, indeed, a brand new podcast show hosted by myself and my trusty researcher pal all the way from another land, Haverok.
Hello, it's me.
Yes, and this isn't like your standard what if round table scenario. No, today this is more like a more relaxed look because we're here up on the lookout. It's a little bit breezy, a little bit chill, quiet. You know, Dende's off doing his own thing, making the Room of Spirit and Time even less relevant and risk-free, health and safety these days. But that's besides the point. What we're here today, we're just going to be talking about random Dragon Ball stuff because the Lookout is part of the franchise. So the purpose of this podcast is just to talk about things that have been going on in the Dragon Ball world, news-related topics, the manga if it's out, which this time indeed is the case, as well as just any type of article or thing Dragon Ball related we find particularly interesting, as well as maybe doing a little bit of a deep dive into the inner thinkings of one of our recent videos on the channel. So, what do you think about this, Haverok? Do you think we're ready to get started?
I think so, and I cannot wait to get started.
Well, that's great. So, if you like what you are hearing, please do leave a like or a comment or whatever is available on like iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever you find this podcast. It's very nice to have you here. And we hope that you do continue to tune in or listen in or whatever you choose to do with this medium. Right, let's begin. All right, like I just said before, there has been a brand new addition to the Dragon Ball Super manga. Chapter 60 came out on the day we are recording this, on Wednesday, the 20th of May, 2020. That's a lot of 20s. And I like the fact that it's on 20 of every month.
I really like this chapter, and I think you did as well. There are some minor things I can say, that weren't quite good, but we'll get to them. But overall, I really like Vegeta's arc in Moro Saga so far. I think he becomes one of the most complete characters, and I think Toyotaro is trying to take him out of those rails of repeating the same character development, for the sake of nostalgia. Just nice.
Yes, no, definitely. Because I felt like with this arc and this particular chapter, there is really a lot going for Vegeta, and there are lots of things that before you could even think, well, wait a minute, that doesn't really work like that. You just think, oh, okay, it's explained very quickly. Spoilers, by the way, if you haven't read the chapter or if you haven't caught up with the manga, I seriously do recommend it. It is available on Viz's website, and you can get access to Shonen Jump for about maybe a couple of bucks a month to all of their content, including My Hero Academia if you wanted to. And this isn't a plug, I'm not sponsored by Viz Media, but I just think it's very, very neat to have all of this really at your fingertips pretty quickly, really. 4 p.m. UK time every month, you get a new super chapter. And everything else, you pretty much get to read for free. I mean, the last couple of chapters have been very action-packed, pretty much ever since Moro's galactic prisoner gang arrived on Earth. There's always been some action. It's not really been all that talky, save for Whis and Miras doing their Supreme Kai impression at being on the sacred world of the Kais, or some heavenly area and looking at a viewing globe.
Yeah, true, there were action-packed, but I had that little feeling that they started to stall. Oh yeah, you have that action, yeah, but it's that sort of stalling of, making you seem that something's happened, but really stalling for more important stuff. You had a lot of fights, but they weren't that meaningful in the end, you know? Like, that's the little problem I had, that you could see that Toyotaro is stalling for more time and more chapters.
Yes. I feel like the pacing was a lot faster in this chapter, certainly, because when the revelation about, the Yardratians can't leave the planet, it made me realize, oh no, that means Vegeta has to learn, or he has to find a way. And I thought, oh no, that's going to probably mean like, oh yeah, I'm ready to come back in this chapter. Oh no, wait, you have to wait another chapter. Oh gosh, darn it. You thought it was going to be one of those things, delaying things, but no, he quickly learnt it. And I think I saw a tweet from Carthu's dojo, and he actually was able to make a parallel on the Saiyan saga. How basically Vegeta derided Goku for training and stuff like that. But now, right at that moment, he actually realized how good Kakarot was and actually respected him for training. He actually finally understood. So, yeah, good on Carthu for spotting that. So credit where credit's due right there.
Yeah, and Pibara even shown that, Vegeta is a prodigy and born of his hard work, which is very ironic when we consider Vegeta at the point when we met him. So it's almost like, it tells about that Vegeta has been literally rebirthed.
It goes into what you've been suggesting for a very long time, in that this is pretty much the precursor to End of Z Vegeta. We needed that spark, that catalyst, and this training could be it. As in, this is finally Vegeta understanding why Goku is so prodigious.
Little thing like, that Vegeta took the time to say, I appreciate everything, Hatsuka, Paibara. He was very cordial with the Yardratians for Vegeta. I think he gets them and they get him in a very weird way, Like I think they get him better than they get Goku, which is something that I really, really like.
Yeah, I mean, the way that the Yardratians strike me is that they're very, very perceptive creatures. And they also, the reason probably why they're not allowed to leave, it's either something that's self-imposed, or I can imagine that the Galactic Patrol have probably told them, no, you can't do this. This will actually cause a lot of havoc, and this is a very broken mechanic. I mean, honestly, ultimately, that all falls apart because they eventually become a taxi service in Dragon Ball Online. But right now, they're pretty much restricted to being on Yardrat, so long as they know that someone out there they've met, they can go. That's a loophole.
Also, the sass of Vegeta at the end, that's some very cool old school Vegeta. We haven't seen that, I think, since Cell Saga to that extent.
Yeah, like stuff like that. And you can really imagine Brian Drummond bringing up the sass factor. I still go on the fact that Morrow to me needs a Scottish accent. He needs a distinctive tone. Just something to really kind of differentiate himself from the typical villain. Because right now, and this is something I really picked up, that Morrow right now, he's not being like any other villain I remember. As in, he is totally in control. And he knows what he's doing. And Goku isn't enjoying this fight at all.
Yeah. The point is that they cannot gang up on him because he will get stronger.
No, yeah, exactly. Because he may want to keep it one-on-one, but if like Gohan or Piccolo decided to jump on him, he'll just take their energy. Or sneaking up on us, are we? Yeah, he just like try and do that and get your energy drained. And then it'll just make the life for Goku even harder. But yeah, no, Goku, throughout all of this, he didn't really show any like excitement towards this fight in this part when he was losing. He wasn't getting a thrill of the battle or anything like that. No, he was getting frustrated and really angry. And that's like, you could chalk that up maybe as like, oh no, the world's in danger. But even then, and even when the universe was at risk, that didn't really stop him from having fun. And yeah, this is a different Goku and it's affecting him differently. And I think this is why Morrow is going to actually be remembered for quite a while.
Yeah, it's pretty cathartic, actually. Like, I think he's different Goku because, see, Morrow isn't Like, he isn't a guy that admires martial arts in any way. Like this, he is smug and he's able to, to play with Goku's smugness. The Goku charm doesn't work on him, And he's like, okay, I guess you're pretty powerful, but I guess I underestimate you. Moro has some really cool smug things. However, I must say that I think one of the things I didn't like about, from Goku's point of view is, Goku's side maybe, is, that Ultra Instinct devolved into another generic, power-up.
Nah, I absolutely agree with you there, mate, because but the thing is, though, this is the typical tradition in Dragon Ball, power-up one-upmanship, It's like, maybe this power is going to be the ultimate technique and power that you can have for maybe, I don't know, an arc, 30, 40 episodes maybe, before it then gets superseded with something else. There is the only thing now that could be consistently great is fusion. That's the only thing that can pretty much win everything. But even then, so you got to really do it quickly, or else you're kind of up the Swanee.
Yeah, but the point is, like Goku, which luckily is noted by the characters. I think either Mirus or Whis notices this, that he doesn't really use Ultra Instinct as it is supposed to work. Like he's like, if I would tell somebody, oh, this is Kaioken, somebody who didn't know what Ultra Instinct is, they would believe seeing the pictures. Oh yeah, that's Kaioken. Goku is using Kaioken. Because it lost, I know that it's kind of harder to show it, in the manga than in animation. But like, this doesn't work like the Ultra Instinct we saw, during the TOP, which is pretty funny to me.
To me, it feels like Mirrors has kind of given Goku not necessarily a power boost, but he has facilitated Ultra Instinct sign for Goku so he can actually use it. So it just means that it's available to him at any time. But if he had more time, then Goku could probably tap into Mastered Ultra Instinct all the time. They obviously didn't have enough, hours or days or whatever to be able to do that. So Goku was going in there half-baked, and Mirrors thought, oh, there might be one way of doing it. But then he forgot, oh yeah, this is Goku. He doesn't really get told what to do. So, unfortunately, yeah, Goku was just like, yeah, you know what, I don't really care. I'm just going to do my way.
Yeah, also, have you noticed that we may get a little hint of what Vegeta's force might be? We haven't seen it working, but we see all those, copied Yardratians, being quite beaten up and being unable to stand. I think I may have an idea what that might be.
Oh, do tell.
I think Vegeta would be able to block Moro's powers and ki.
Oh, okay. So this is like an as of yet unknown Yardratian power, like probably ki suppression.
Yeah.
Because there is ki projection.
Yeah.
Ki suppression naturally. So unlike Android 21 that did it via machines, this time it's all done around using energy to cancel it out. So maybe this is a power that was otherwise unknown to us. So maybe all those other kind of shop parlor powers that we saw was a red herring. It was all a decoy. That's a really good theory, Hav. I mean, if that were the case, then maybe they were able to find a way to, cancel out ki and prevent people from moving. Then I think that's really the only way, aside from overloading Moro with power, which seems pretty much impossible. That's the only way. And if Vegeta can do it, then, I mean, even if it means that Goku can get the final strike, but if Vegeta can get the ultimate crucial assist that cannot be done by anyone else, I'll take that.
Again, because they don't feel the strength increase. And I think that's because there's no really a strength increase, but might be, a new method of dealing with the opponents. And when you see on those Yardratians, they don't look terribly beaten, but they have problems standing back. They are laying on their backs, They have problem moving. So Or something even more cool, like to make opponents collapse under the weight of their own power.
Oh, ironic punishment. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's something like that. Like that would be a very Vegeta thing to do.
Oh, yes, of course. But the one thing I noticed a lot of people being worried about is that Vegeta did his signature thumbs up. And everyone who knows about Dragon Ball is that if he does that, he does ultimately lose. Hopefully, maybe Toyotaro's aware of this and he's going like, you know what? Let's play with the people's minds and let's throw them for a loop again and, have Vegeta actually win or not lose at the very least.
Yeah. Can we talk about Beerus in this one? Because people interpret it in the way that, oh, I want so food, stop looking at Earth. But I think that he doesn't want to hear about it because he's worried. We can see Beerus and Whis being quite shocked at what's happening. Well, quite shocked for angels, and Beerus being like looking pretty grim, Like some people think that maybe Beerus will join the fray, maybe, maybe the fact that Whis is telling, oh yes, only Omni King or Lord Beerus can do something about this. That maybe Beerus will step in and maybe, it may change with Vegeta getting an upper hand over Moro and Moro managing to, drink some of that sweet, sweet Beeruski.
That might be interesting in of itself, but to me, my interpretation of that was that Beerus wants to go back and help in some way, and Whis is suddenly being all high and mighty and just going like, we angels are not supposed to interfere. And it's like, guys, you've been interfering. Not as much as Beerus has, but you've been active. You've been actively hanging out with these mortals. So you really shouldn't be ones to talk. But this could be a very interesting start of maybe Whis and Beerus realizing that they've gotten too chummy with these people, and this might lead to the fact that in End of Z, there is no sign of them at all. So yeah, this could be the beginning of the end of their involvement with these Saiyans. Because what else can they be taught? Because they now know how to access God Ki. Super Saiyan Blue can be refined because Vegeta can do it. They now know Ultra Instinct, and Ultra Instinct is meant to be the pinnacle. That's what GODs are meant to know. That's what they're meant to have all the time. So what else is Whis got there to teach? The only way that, Goku can stay in the fraternity is going to the GP and being trained under him, which has long been a theory of mine and something that has been teased in Super Dragon Ball Heroes and didn't really amount to anything because of lags.
Again, I feel that Beerus, he doesn't show it outside, but I think he's feeling similar to Beerus in that scene, but he doesn't want to admit it. Like, Beerus is also a big tsundere, come on. We could see it with his brother Champa, we could see it, with him reacting to Goku, seemingly dying during TOP. I think he's just trying to change the subject. I'm not worried. And he can always brush it off as, oh, well, I was just worried about delicious food on Earth. Obviously, I wasn't worried about you guys.
That's very true because, when in doubt, just hide behind the food. That's pretty much what he does all the time. So, no, absolutely, that's a fair point. Absolutely. But I think, in closing, this manga chapter has addressed the whole issue of pacing. The pacing was a lot better in this one, and the action was very fluid. If this ever gets animated, I'm sure it's going to look absolutely splendid. It allows itself into the Shintani art school of design. Absolutely. So, realistically, I personally think that maybe the last chapter will be the final one in terms of the main content. And it'll lead to, maybe 62 being the aftermath and stuff like that. And maybe a couple of filler arcs in chapter 63. But either way, I think we're almost there at the end game.
Well, I agree with you. We are on the end game, but I think we haven't seen Moro's final form yet. That's my theory.
Because what we've seen before is that he gets younger and younger with all of his transformations. Do we then get to see the perfect baby Moro.
Kid Moro, no.
No, it's Moro baby because, baby Yoda and baby Sonic and baby Mr. Peanut. That's trending, yeah. We're now moving on to something I really wanted to discuss, and this comes from the Tao of Dragon Ball, and it's a friend of the channel, Derek Padula. He does a lot of books about Dragon Ball language and culture, and one of his books, Dragon's Soul, talks to many different fans across the world, myself included, about what Dragon Ball means to them. And quite clearly, Dragon Ball means a lot to a lot of people, but a very, very, I don't want to say controversial, but very, very bold interview from Akira Toriyama's long-standing editor, Kazuhiko Torishima, actually really blows the door open in terms of, what the higher-ups think. And Derek has actually produced a short little audio clip about his thoughts on all the topics in this particular article. So we shall cut to that and he can say his piece.
Hey, Lawrence. Thanks for having me on your show. This is a really interesting article about Torishima-san, isn't it? I feel like there's so much that can be said, so many different angles to look at his comments from. And I've received hundreds of comments from Dragon Ball fans all over the world reacting to what some perceive as just a flat out insult from Torishima-san to other Dragon Ball fans, and others feel is just a matter of fact statement. This is the editor of Dragon Ball telling you that Dragon Ball means nothing and that you should not analyze it and that there are no lessons to be learned from it and that it's just a funny comic and there's nothing more to it, and they accept that. I have a hard time accepting that given who I am and what I do, because I analyze Dragon Ball for a living. I was given it by an Italian fan who contacted me on my Facebook page, and he said, hey, I want to translate your books into Italian because you wrote so much about Torishima-san and his relationship with Toriyama and the creation of Dragon Ball. And I thought that was so fascinating that I was tempted to, write my own book about it, but I just felt like yours was so thorough. There's no way I could do it better. But by the way, there's this interview you should check out where he talks about Fist of the North Star, Hokuto no Ken, and how that influenced Dragon Ball. So I was reading through it and I was translating it as I went, and I was like, yeah, that's fascinating that he used Fist of the North Star for the action scenes in the Tenkaichi Budokai origin. But there's a lot more fascinating things besides Fist of the North Star here. Like the fact that he said Dragon Ball is meaningless and there's nothing to learn from it. I know, because I've written about him, I know how he feels and I know how he speaks. He's very blunt and direct. But to just come out and say that repeatedly, to even have that attitude about a work that you have been so interwoven with for the last 35 years, and if you count Dr. Slump, in the last 40 years, how can you not understand the effect that it's had on other people? How can you be so distant from it, disconnected, At this point, haven't you just, been curious to look at your own work, to read it, to understand why people love it so much, not just in Japan, but, in countries all over the world? Hundreds of millions of people. Like, why does it sell so much? Is it just because of the action? Just because it's funny? Just because it's got nice art? Like, how can you not be curious to understand your own art and the way that it's affected other human beings? So that's what was so bewildering to me. And I was just trying to wrap my head around that. It's not so much the comments themselves, because I don't agree with what he said. And I think Dragon Ball is extremely meaningful. And there was a poll that just came out in Japan that showed that Japanese citizens believe that Dragon Ball is the number 3 most meaningful manga and anime of all time. Okay, it was Kochi Kame was number 1, about the policeman in Japan, and then Slam Dunk was number 2. But 4 votes behind Slam Dunk was Dragon Ball. So Dragon Ball could have easily been number 2 with a few more votes. And it's like, yeah, the Japanese people get it. And so I just think it's so interesting the way that he doesn't understand what the fans feel. He hasn't shown any signs of understanding it. When as I was translating it, I'm like, okay, this is an important article and I need to pay real attention to this. And I make sure I get all the translations right so people don't misquote it. So I spent a lot of time on that. And I feel like people are getting it, people are reacting to it. I posted it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, and Kanzenshu, and a lot of different reactions. But I think like 80% of people disagree with him. And of those, the majority strongly disagree with him, saying he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Other people are more moderate, saying, yeah, it's a children's manga. So you kind of have to accept that it's not going to be the deepest thing in the world. And others are, the other 20% are saying, yeah, he's right. And I'm so glad that he's finally come out and said this because I'm getting tired of all the people out there trying to intellectualize Dragon Ball. I think some people told me they were hurt by it. They connect with Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball is a part of them. It's who they are. And the meaning of Dragon Ball is what we make of it as individuals. Even if Toriyama-san says there is no meaning, we as viewers interpret the artwork created by Toriyama and the writing that the two of them worked on together in our own way, and it can mean whatever we want it to mean. And for some of us, it's extremely meaningful. I know many people who wouldn't even be alive today if it weren't for Dragon Ball. So, when Toriyama-san says there's no life lessons in it, well, he's just flat out wrong. There's so many different examples of ways that Dragon Ball have inspired artists and philosophers, YouTubers like yourself, cosplayers, voice actors like yourself. All these people all over the world have been inspired by Dragon Ball because there's substance to it. He says there's no substance. It's like, how can you say that there's no substance? I mean, it's not like it's a Sunday funnies comic, It's not like somebody drew a little doodle and then you can snicker at it and then walk away. Like, this is a narrative story that goes on for years and years, and we grow up with it. So of course it's going to mean something, and it's filled with thousands of years of cultural symbols and religious artifacts and spiritual concepts. You guys are going to say that none of that has any meaning? Like, well, then life and human existence doesn't have any meaning. There's no culture. There's no Japanese culture and Chinese culture and Western culture and the way that Toriyama fuses it all together. You're saying that none of that exists? That just doesn't make sense to me. So, but I also get that he's a businessman. He's an editor. He's trying to get a product out that sells and makes a profit for the company so they can continue to pay for all the employees who make their livelihood from doing this, so they can sustain their family and live the lives that they want to live. And so I guess for some of them, it's not art. It's certainly not high art that they might conceive it as. Produces a profit, and then they move on. And looking back at Toriyama-san's history, when he first started at Shueisha, he wanted to work at Playboy. He wanted to work on sophisticated articles, but then he gets assigned to Shonen Jump. Of course, he's going to be of a different mind, right? He's not going to want to work on that. And maybe that's still true today. Maybe he never liked manga. Maybe he never enjoyed Shonen Jump and didn't appreciate Akira Toriyama's work as art. Maybe he just thought of it as a product that you could sell, and he could fatten his own bank account with his partnership with Toriyama and Shueisha and however that worked. And now he's the CEO of Haku Sensha, another big manga publisher. Maybe he doesn't like that either. Maybe it's just business for him. Maybe none of this is art. I really am curious to know how he feels about this. And I'd also like to know how he feels about the reaction to this, because the original Japanese article, it only had like 4 comments on it. It seemed like nobody cared. But my translation is getting a lot of traction, and it seems like a lot of people around the world are responding to this in a strong way. On one side of the spectrum or the other, people are emphatic about it, and it's easy to understand why. So I look forward to seeing what other people have to say about it, especially in the comments of your video. I want to see what people think. from a wide array of perspectives. And thank you for allowing me to come on and talk about this. I think it's a really interesting piece of history here, and time will tell how this affects the fandom. So thanks, Lawrence, and have a good one.
This article was an interview that was done back in October 2019 with the people that developed many of the Naruto games and .hack, and even actually Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. So probably this was like on this blog that was in the run-up to Kakarot coming out. And, there were some things initially in the interview that did, carry over from what Toriyama said in the past, that Dragon Ball wasn't popular to begin with. And, the first arc, needed to be changed up, otherwise it was going to fail. So that was all very true. But then you get to the point where Torishima just goes like, there is no meaning to it. It's meaningless, effectively. I think, they kind of act very, apathetically towards it, like saying these quotes, these are sizzle quotes. There is nothing to learn from Dragon Ball. And so you see, there's nothing in it to analyze, which I personally think is a load of bull. And I think this is something we actually talked about in our retcons video right at the end, in that it's all about generational stuff. As in, it's all about our generation sees Dragon Ball one way and maybe the older generation sees it in a different way. But Torishima in this article was basically saying, and I'll leave a link to the original post from Derek, that he basically saw what was going on in the Fist of the North Star manga and the anime and just thought, yeah, I want some of that. Let's just do that. And to say this right now, after 35 years of this manga and this series being a thing, why? Just, I don't get it. Haverok, you read the article. I mean, what was your take on it?
To me, listen, Kazuhiko Toroshima is a guy who cared for how the manga would sell, and if it was popular with people. He really doesn't care, about any meanings, any cultural context. I don't think he even considers the basic definition of interpretation, which is like reading the cultural text in all available, cultural symbols, and contexts. And I would say that you can read Dragon Ball in many cultural context. It's not a very deep story, but it doesn't have to be deep to be pretty educational in case of cultural context. So, I feel that he didn't really care. I don't think that Toriyama cared either. They are not artistic souls, They are craftsmen. And I think that good craftsmanship work can lead to something really great and really amazing. And also that some things that are so obvious for them will be pretty enlightening to people all over the world,
Yeah. Now that's absolutely fair, because in the end, this is meant to be a manga and a series which is meant to make money. And it did. And the choices that Torishima made worked out. They really helped. And as we've known, Torishima is one of the few people that can make Toriyama actually work and do stuff. So, yeah, credit where credit's due there. That's absolutely true. And this article doesn't mean that, Torishima should be condemned or anything like that. This just goes to show that any meaning that is taken from it has to be really, really thought through. And I know that a lot of critics of Dragon Ball will just be rubbing their hands with glee and saying this just proves it. Dragon Ball is, absolute, fluff, and it's really not worth getting in a flap about. Not a lot of things, especially in creative media, they're not by circumstance or anything like that, or by coincidence. for example, I've recently finished writing part 7 of Frieza Turned Good, one of the what ifs. And basically, I was like trying to like give some Cowboy Bebop Outlaw Star vibes from my crew in that series. I'm inspired by it, and I wish to create meaning that feels pretty much in keeping with Dragon Ball, because it's still meant to be a Dragon Ball what if, but obviously hark to some of the anime series of around the time DBZ was a thing, like around the mid to late 90s. So it's all about context, and it's all about inspiration. And yeah, Torishima does talk about inspiration, but he was basically kind of just going, I like that. I'm gonna copy it. If things came at the right time and different time, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure might have actually figured into Dragon Ball's history in some way. Hirohiko Araki, maybe, I don't know. And that's not just because I watched JoJo or anything like that. It's just, it came out around about the mid-80s, 1987 and stuff like that. The Dragon Ball manga had already been well established, but Torishima, looking at the pulse of manga, it's very, very possible that another manga could have taken his fancy. And yeah, and to be honest, if Dragon Ball had failed, I mean, Toriyama would have still been a very wealthy man from Dr. Slump. He'd have either done something else, done another series, or he would have probably retired. Just doing working on Dr. Slump. Just more Dr. Slump, pretty much. I think Torishima would have just gone like, nah, that Dragon Ball thing doesn't work. Let's just bring back Dr. Slump and stuff like that. Yeah, let's just do a spin-off. Dr. Slump Z or something like that.
It may be cultural thing, or just his personal thing, because Torishima had very specific reputation, even from Toriyama. Authorial intent is rarely taken into consideration when reading text of culture. Like, do we really know what Homer thought, when he supposedly wrote Odyssey and Iliad? We can try and analyze interpretations of people from the later days, but we will never be sure. And that doesn't stop people from analyzing and using it. And, we got things like Ulysses, which is basically from James Joyce, which is basically in his modern times rereading of Odyssey. We talked about this recently with Lucia, our friend and actress for our R&R Trunks, that it's kind of amazing how Toriyama took Journey to the West, which was basically fantasized up version of Adventures of a Real Monk. And that's, I think that's amazing. And to say that there is nothing to learn from it, I mean, again, listen, Torishima, I'm glad that you made your money on Dragon Ball. I really do, but I think you don't give your work enough credit.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it should have been like Toriyama there as well, probably fighting his own corner. But at this time, I don't think he is really that bothered. I mean, he's made his millions, probably billions of yen from Dragon Ball, Dr. Slump, whatever he does, even Jarko in some way. But, that's it. That he doesn't really mind. I mean, something tells me he might just do one big interview, like one last one, and then retire for good, probably, before he, passes or whatever. But really, I recommend that you read this article because it is very, very incendiary initially, but it's not as drastic as you think, but it's more disappointing. And it just really reminds you that at the end of the day, at places like Shueisha and places where they do manga and comic books and stuff like that, it's all down to what will sell. Because you could make an absolute masterpiece. You could make something that's really funny. But if it doesn't tick the boxes and it doesn't work well with focus groups and optics and basic ratings, especially back in the 80s when that mattered even more, you're done. You're pretty much done. And you have to adapt. If your editor tells you need to change this to make it more like that, you need to be, yes, okay, I will. The only few people that can basically say, forget that, I'm doing it my way, are like people like Oda, Kishimoto, Araki, all the big wigs, like all the big mangaka. They can basically go, I'm doing what I want. And they will go, yeah, okay. So that's pretty much my take of it. I again ask you and recommend to read the article from Derek. And we'll move on to the next subject of the podcast. And that's kind of taking, what if we talked more about a what if or discussion?
Well, I'm kind of interested how people will react to the upcoming discussion about dragon villains being too simple, but I don't want to take too much of the stuff that's in the actual discussion.
Well, it'll be okay because by the time this comes out, it will have actually been out because, you know, as we're recording it, that discussion comes out tomorrow. So we can talk about it.
Tomorrow.
Oh, no pun intended. Oh,
okay.
That was no pun intended there, folks.
Yeah, so to get, you know, to the meat and potatoes of everything, like, I often see a critique against Moro that he's, too simple, he doesn't have any deep motivation. And I'm like, how many Dragon Ball villains really have deeper motivation? Really? Dr. Giro somehow, but we learn it through extra media, and he's still a horrible person, which completely takes from his sympathetic side. Kind of Vegeta, but we don't, but not really. Like he was a brat as a kid as well, and he didn't really care that much of losing his family.
But at least he redeemed himself. He redeemed himself at the very least. Then, of course, don't forget there's Zamasu. And that, to me, strikes me as Dragon Ball's interpretation of a modern villain in an anime. As in, they have to basically... If this was animated by Madhouse or stuff like that, Zamasu would fit in perfectly. Because he is this bastion of justice. He talks about morality, the relationship between deities and the living creatures, what is justice, what is good, what is evil. And it's very, very interesting to see this level of debate in a Sunday morning cartoon show. But you forget this is a Sunday morning cartoon show, Zama, so calm down. Like, calm down, mate. You know, you don't need to go this philosophical and this deep. This isn't a primetime show.
And, you know, you are supposed to be sympathetic, you know, towards him, but I thought that was the intention, but it, like, Zamasu is kind of a jerk from the very beginning.
Yeah, it's very, very much the case of he is an absolute jerk for a long time, and it's only after a couple of years away from that manga arc and that series arc that you actually start to think, you know what, Zamasu's not that bad. You know, he's still a jerk, and it felt really good when Beerus said Hakai at him. That felt really good. And I'm pretty sure a lot of other people thought the same way. Yeah, I can't be all too mad at him anymore, but he was probably the most complex villain in a while.
But that didn't work in his favor, sadly. Like, again, I kind of like him. He's kind of unique, and I think like he's worthy of being called a Dragon Ball villain, you know? But certainly, you know, better than most of the movie villains. Like, I get that you guys have issues with manga. Like, it's not perfect by any means, but like to toss shade on Moro, which can also be thrown on Cell and Frieza, you know?
That first panel of Goku sensing his energy and being scared of it. Like, Moro was like, "Oh, hi there, you wee beastie." And then, like, basically Goku's like, "Whoa!" He was spooked by it. Like, this was enough to really give him the giblies. And that is a pretty big deal. Like, how lately in the manga, Whis is actually showing concern. And I've always said this, having Whis show concern and slight worry is a big deal. And these little subtle moments where, you know, characters act slightly differently, that's the impact. It's not necessarily what Moro does directly, because in the manga chapters, he doesn't really do much lately. He just is there to fight And that is what he does. But it's how he makes people react and how he makes people think differently. And they have to think differently. They can't just hit him really hard because that doesn't work. And it's all about they have to think different. And that is what Moro's legacy will be, because he will lose, but he was a different kind of villain, but also fairly straightforward. He basically wanted all the worlds. He wanted a very big meal. He was Galactus, pretty much. Galactus in ram form.
Yeah, but Galactus, like Galactus without the whole force of nature and,
Oh yeah, it's a very, as you say, simplified for Dragon Ball because, there is that Marvel connection, obviously, with Toyotaro, as we all know.
Pretty famous one.
Yeah, of course. We won't say more about that. But, he does like his Marvel. So it's not potentially far-fetched. Or even Surf-etched. I got that in before. Because I know that's your favorite Pokemon at the moment. Or it's one of your favorites. Yeah,
one of this, yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's certainly very much to talk about in that, the villains of Dragon Ball, they aren't that complex and they don't need to be. Most shonen,
they're charming.
They are, exactly. They're memorable.
Acceptable. Don't at me, don't hate me. But I think Moro is a league better villain than Majin Buu ever was.
Well, at that point, as we discussed in the video tomorrow, Toriyama didn't care. Toriyama was like, I don't care. This is just like, I am basically venting my frustration out in this chaotic form. Pretty much. And Yu Kondo, the editor at the time, was like, yeah, Mr. Toriyama, you do what you want. Because they just wanted to keep him around for another couple of years. And it worked. Toriyama being able to do what he wanted, it worked in terms of keeping people happy. But looking back on it 25 years later, not too sure whether this is aged well. Not sure. But yeah, the majority of the villains are memorable. They are not forgetful. Even the GT villains are actually somewhat unforgettable. Except for Super 17. That was just that was weird.
I mean, he's unforgettable, but for wrong reasons.
Yeah, it's like you want to forget him. Yeah, so unfortunately that is the case. But in terms of that, you don't, in a shonen series, need to have really difficult, complex villains. Unless you want to be like the 7 Deadly Sins approach and stuff like that, where you have that, fantasy aspect and you can go a little bit deeper. But for your typical, your Yu-Gi-Ohs, your Narutos, you can go deep if you want to. But ultimately, they're bad guys that you are going out to punch and hopefully win. That's pretty much it. So with Dragon Ball, it was one of the first. So it could keep to a very, very basic formula. And people would be okay with it. I think now this is actually a good way to sign everything off for the podcast. But if you liked this formula, do let us know down in the comments. And please be sure to, share this podcast with people that you know like Dragon Ball and whether you'd be interested for more of these. And we'll have this up on the channel and in various places.
Yeah, if you guys want us to invite someone and try to get them, here.
If you'd like us to have a guest to join us for a particular topic, then we are more than happy to look into it.
We already have some people that, have shown interest, so,
Oh, yeah, exactly, so you never know. So do let us know what you think of this, and we hope to see you once again up on the lookout. Take care, everyone.
Take care, be like Goku and punch evil guys in the face.